All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Well, folks, the calendar has shifted to the month of August. And with that said, the start of the college football season is right around the corner. We're going to have games taking place before the end of this month. And as promised, this month I'm going to be talking a lot of football on this platform. First things first, with the start of this new season, a lot of things are going to be different. First things first, the Pac 12, Pac 8, Pac 10, which we've known it for years, really does no longer exist. We've seen the Big Ten get their fair share of teams in the Pac 12. Same thing can be said for the ACC and the Big 12. How are those teams going to shape up in their respective leagues? How are Oklahoma and Texas going to look in the SEC? And of course, the expanded college football playoff. We've gone from 4 to 12, and we're not going to be at 12 for that long before we hit 14. But nonetheless, right now, first and foremost, I am going to be talking about my top 25 for the upcoming season. And folks, please feel free to agree. Please feel free to disagree. And at the end of the day, if you feel your team should be ranked higher or ranked lower, definitely please feel free to drop some comments. Okay. First things first, my number one team heading into this upcoming college football season is the team that calls Athens, Georgia home. And I'm talking about the Georgia Bulldogs. These Bulldogs, they're in the midst of one of, if not the greatest runs in program history. We saw Georgia go back to back as far as winning the national championship. Came very close to making it three in a row last year. Were undefeated and the top ranked team in the playoff rankings heading into the SEC championship game before they fell to Alabama. But nonetheless, we are talking about a Georgia team that is 42-2 over the last 3 years. Those two losses came to Alabama, both in the SEC championship game. But last year, we learned a lot about this Georgia club. It was a smooth transition from quarterback Stetson Bennett, who was at the controls for those two national championships, to Carson Beck. We saw Carson Beck be calm, cool, and collected in that pocket last year for Georgia. And I guarantee you, the seniors should only get better as the eyes of the National Football League are upon them. Now, the running game has been a staple at Georgia for years. Okay. It is their bread and butter. You can go down the list as far as the coaches that have had top running backs and the running backs that have come through this program. It should be more of the same this year for Georgia. They just brought in former Florida running back Trevor Etienne. So that's going to add a lot to that rivalry with the Gators. But nonetheless, this running attack for Georgia should once again be potent. You think about Georgia under head coach Kirby Smart, and you think about their defense. They had the top ranked defense in the SEC last year, and you can only expect more of the same this season. You got senior middle linebacker Smale Munden back, and also keep an eye out for junior free safety Malachi Starks. Very interesting schedule for the Bulldogs this year. Why? Because there's no more divisional formats in the SEC. So Georgia's going to face some of those proverbial teams from the SEC West, if you will. Very interesting the way that Georgia's getting the season started in Atlanta. They're home away from home. They're taking on Clemson out of the SEC. September 28th, the Bulldogs travel to Tuscaloosa to take on Alabama. They flip that around the following week by hosting Auburn, and then a game that a lot of people are looking at. October the 19th, Georgia at Texas. And then on the 9th of November, Georgia at Ole Miss. And then they follow that up by hosting Tennessee. And then they finish at home with some clean old-fashioned hate against Georgia Tech. And remember, Georgia Tech gave Georgia all that they could handle last year. New head coach, and the Yellow Jackets are trying to once again make this a rivalry. So it's going to be interesting to see how things work out for Georgia this fall. Number two, I'm going to go with Texas. And, we got the Longhorns who are set to begin life in a new conference. They're going to the SEC. They got the hype train with them, okay, and they've got some talent under Sark. I mean, you got junior quarterback Quinn Ewers with Arch Manning right there, waiting in the wings. Steve Sarkisian has been able to run the football effectively every place that he has been as a head coach. You got CJ Baxter and you got Jaden Blue. You get former Alabama wide receiver Isaiah Bond and then former Oregon State wide receiver Silas Bolden. And then this defense, you've got 7 seniors starting on that side of the ball for the Longhorns, and you've got an outstanding sophomore outside linebacker and Anthony Hill Jr. For Texas and the SEC, it's going to be very interesting to see how things work out for the Longhorns. I like their big contest in September outside of conference. They're traveling to Big Ten country, if you will, to take on Michigan in Ann Arbor. That should be an interesting one. Texas's first SEC game will be at home against Mississippi State. Of course, they still get Oklahoma in Dallas on October 12th. They follow that up by hosting Georgia. I just talked about that game. And then, of course, now that Texas is back in the same conference with Texas A&M, a rivalry will be renewed on November 30th when the folks from Austin travel to College Station to take on the Aggies. Number three, I'm going to go with the Ohio State University. And you look at Ohio State, over the last 3 years, the Buckeyes are 33-6, which includes going 27-3 in the Big Ten. They haven't gotten to the playoff all the time. And of course, last year, they lost to Michigan the end of season. That ended their chances. Of course, an expanded playoff right now is going to change that. But, the bugaboo, of course, in recent years has been their inability after they've dominated Michigan for so many years to beat them. No more Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. It's Ryan Day going up against Sharon Moore for the top spot there. The transfer portal, okay, was big for Ohio State this offseason. You get in former K-State quarterback Will Howard. You get in former Ole Miss running back Quinshawn Judkins. You get former Alabama free safety Caleb Downs, and then a move that I think has somewhat flown under the radar this offseason. Former UCLA head coach and former Oregon head coach Chip Kelly is now the offensive coordinator for Ryan Day. You know that the Buckeyes are going to run the football. You know it's going to be up tempo. And it's not just about Quinshawn Judkins in that backfield for Ohio State. You've also got Travion Henderson as well. Having a healthy Emeka Egbuka at wide receiver this year could be important for Ohio State. And then you've got a phenomenal defensive end in Jack Sawyer. For the Buckeyes, the expectations are always high. It's not just about winning the Big Ten. It's about getting to the playoff. It's about contending for that national championship. Their contest on November 12th, when they travel to Eugene to take on Oregon, is going to have a big time say as far as who gets to the Big Ten championship game. November 2nd, we're going to see the Buckeyes travel to Happy Valley to take on Penn State. And of course, finishing at home in the horseshoe with Michigan. Number four, I'm staying in the Big Ten. And we got to get used to saying this team in the Big Ten, okay? But I'm going to go with the Oregon Ducks. And I mean, we've seen Oregon for about a quarter century be one of the top dogs or top ducks, if you will, in the Pac 12 conference. And, now they've got to try to get accustomed to life in the Big Ten. But Oregon head coach Dan Lanning has done a phenomenal job of recruiting since he's been in Eugene. And also, he has made the most out of the transfer portal. First, he got quarterback Bo Nix from Auburn. And of course, Bo Nix ended up being a first round pick in this past spring's NFL draft, courtesy of the Denver Broncos. And now it's Dylan Gabriel who's coming west. And you look at Dylan Gabriel, he started at UCF, went to Oklahoma, had the Sooners rolling for a good chunk of last season. And now he's going to the Pacific Northwest. You've got a seasoned vet and a good leader in Gabriel. And I think he's going to look to help this Ducks team remain as one of the top football programs in the country. Oregon can run the football with Jordan James and Noah Whittington. I like senior wide receiver Tez Johnson. And then on this defense for the Ducks, 8 seniors starting, including linebacker Jeffrey Bassa. It's one of those where, of course, we're accustomed to seeing the Civil War take place in November. That's no longer going to be the case, but Oregon and Oregon State are still going to meet. And we're going to see the Ducks travel to Corvallis on September the 14th. I talked about that meeting with Ohio State on the 12th of October. Oregon goes to Michigan on November 2nd. That's going to be big. And then they're at Wisconsin on November 16th. A couple of teams that they could face and usually would face in the Rose Bowl. And then, of course, they finish up at home with Washington. Number 5, I'm going to go with Penn State. And I'm staying in the Big Ten clearly. As you look at the Nittany Lions, they have been a solid, and they have had a solid program, should I say, under head coach James Franklin. Their biggest bugaboo has been being unable to get past both Michigan and Ohio State in that Big Ten East. Like I said, we no longer have to worry about the divisional format, but the Nittany Lions once again have a good team. Uh, Quarterback Drew Aller was efficient last season, only threw 2 picks, wants to get his completion percentage up some more, of course. You know that Penn State is going to run the football with Katron Allen. They lost wide receiver Keandre Lambert Smith in the transfer portal to Auburn, but then they picked up former Ohio State wide receiver Julian Fleming. On top of that, the Nittany Lions had the second best defense in the nation a year ago, and then they lost the defensive coordinator Manny Diaz, as he's now the head coach at Duke. And this looks like it's going to be co-coordinators with Tom Allen and Anthony Poindexter. But James Franklin knows how to recruit. He's got talent on that side of the football with the likes of linebacker Kobe King and defensive end Abdul Carter. And for me with Penn State, very interesting to get Ohio State at home on November 2nd, which is followed by hosting Washington the week after that. But then on the 12th of October, they're at USC, and then they're at Wisconsin on the 26th of October. Keeping it in the Big Ten, I'm going to go with another new member to this mega conference. I'm going with USC at number 6. And of course, we've known the Men of Troy to be a flagship program or the flagship program for the Pac 12 for decades. And now they have to get accustomed to life in the Big Ten. Also, of course, no more Caleb Williams at quarterback as he's in the NFL with the Bears. And head coach Lincoln Riley looks like he's going to go with Miller Moss. For me, the biggest thing, because you know that Lincoln Riley's offenses are going to produce points, but USC has to fix the defense. They brought in former UCLA defensive coordinator D'Anton Lynn to try to fix that, as the Trojans were 119th last year in the nation on that side of the ball. They got some experience, okay? USC is projected to have 7 defensive starters that are seniors. And I really want to see how the Trojans navigate this schedule. They begin their season in Vegas against LSU. They're at Michigan on the 21st of September. That's their welcome to the Big Ten moment. They follow that up by hosting Wisconsin the following week. They get Penn State at the Coliseum on the 12th of October. They're at Washington to begin November, and then they're at UCLA later that month, and then they finish up at home against Notre Dame. That could be a big game, okay, between the Trojans and the Irish as far as the playoff picture goes. Speaking of those Irish, I got them coming in at number 7. And you look at Notre Dame, it's been a seamless transition from Brian Kelly to Marcus Freeman as the head coach. You look at Notre Dame over the last 2 years, they're 19-7. Last year, 2 out of their 3 losses were by 8 points or less, okay? And with this expanded playoff format, I do expect Notre Dame to be able to hang with the nation's elite. It's been one of those where, you know what, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Before, we saw Notre Dame go to the ACC to get a quarterback as they got Sam Hartman leave Wake Forest to join Notre Dame. This time around, it's former Duke quarterback Riley Leonard. You got a quality running back if you're the Irish and Jeremiah Love. And then this Notre Dame defense was 5th in the nation a year ago. 2 guys to keep an eye out for are going to be veteran outside linebacker Jack Kaiser, as well as veteran safety Xavier Watts, who I think has the potential to be an All-American this year for Notre Dame. To begin their year, they go to College Station to take on Texas A&M. They host Louisville at the end of September. They host Florida State on November 9th. And then they're at USC to finish the regular season at the end of November. Number 8, I'm going to go with Alabama. And for me, it's no secret that the Tide are going to look a lot different than what folks have been accustomed to. I mean, you think about the job, the level of excellence, if you will, that Nick Saban set forth with this program. You talk about Saban's record at Alabama: 201 to 29 losses, 117 and 18 in the SEC alone. But make no mistake about it, the guy that the folks in Tuscaloosa have to replace Nick Saban and Kalen DeBoer, he's no slouch either. Okay, we just saw him go 25-3 in 2 years at Washington, which included leading the Huskies to a berth in the national championship game this past January. Now, Alabama has lost some talent in the portal, but there's still a lot of quality talent to work with in Tuscaloosa. It's going to be interesting to see how quarterback Jalen Milroe fits into Kalen DeBoer's system. That's going to be very interesting right there. You still got a lot of talent on the defensive side of the football with the likes of outside linebacker Deontay Lawson, as well as Jihad Campbell and free safety Malachi Moore. It's going to be a transition year for Alabama, but nonetheless, I still think that they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. They're at Wisconsin on the 14th of September. They host Georgia to end that month. They're at Tennessee on October 19th. So at least we still get the third Saturday in October this year. They host Missouri on the 26th of October. They're at LSU, okay, on November 9th. They're at Oklahoma on the 23rd. And then they follow that up by hosting Auburn in the Iron Bowl to finish their season. So LSU, Oklahoma, and Auburn in the same month. That's going to be tough for Alabama. Number 9, I'm going to go to the Atlantic Coast Conference, and I'm going to go with the Florida State Seminoles. And you look at the job that Mike Norvell has done in a very quick time as far as turning things around in Tallahassee and getting the Seminoles back into the national picture. Now, we saw Florida State win the ACC last year for the first time in 9 years. And also, they had an undefeated regular season. Of course, we know the fiasco, if you will, if you want to call it that, for the folks in Tallahassee as far as how things went down for the playoff. But nonetheless, you look at this Florida State team. No more Jordan Travis at quarterback, but you get the well-traveled DJU. He's been at Clemson. He's been at Oregon State, and now he's back in the ACC. And it's not just DJU who Florida State picked up in the portal. A couple of former Alabama players and running back Roydell Williams and wide receiver Malik Benson. I like this Florida State offensive line. A lot of senior experience over there, as they've got 4 seniors projected to start on that side of the football. And then defensively, keep an eye out for linebacker DJ Lundy as well as defensive end Patrick Payton. So the Noles begin their year in Dublin in a couple of weeks, in 3 weeks, matter of fact, against Georgia Tech. They host Memphis out of the American, of course, Mike Norvell's former program, on the 14th of September. They're at SMU, the new member, or one of the new members of the ACC, on the 28th of September. Then, of course, hosting Clemson on the 5th of October. That's always a big game. They're at Miami to finish the month of October, and then they're at Notre Dame on the 9th of November. And then, of course, finishing off with the Gators. Number 10, rounding out the top 10, I'm going to go with the defending national champions in the Michigan Wolverines. And a lot has changed for the Maize and Blues since last January. Of course, Jim Harbaugh, after 9 years, is no longer the Wolverines head coach, as he's back in the NFL, this time with the Chargers. So you've got Sharon Moore. And of course, Sharon Moore stepped in place last year for Harbaugh during his suspension, and the Wolverines didn't skip a beat. But it's not just about replacing Harbaugh. You got a lot of talent for this Michigan squad that has moved on. Quarterback J.J. McCarthy's in the NFL with the Vikings. So now it's going to be Alex Orji, and Orji is more of a runner than a thrower. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Wolverines offense looks with him operating things. The heart and soul of this team is also in the NFL right now as well. I'm talking about running back Blake Corum, but Michigan still has plenty of depth at that position, and it starts with Donovan Edwards, who is a burner. Keep an eye out for junior tight end Colston Loveland. And I know that Michigan lost some talent on the defensive side of the football. No more junior Colson, excuse me, and Mike Sangstriel. But you've got 10 starters for the Wolverines that are either going to be seniors, juniors, or grad students. So they've been in this program for some time. For Michigan, I talked about the Texas game before. They host USC on the 21st. They're at Washington on the 5th of October. They host Oregon on the 2nd of November. And of course, traveling to Columbus on November 30th to take on Ohio State. Number 11, I'm going to go with Utah. And of course, Utah switching from the Pac 12 to the Big 12. But, for me with the Utes, it doesn't matter if they're playing in the WAC, Mountain West, Pac 12, whoever. They're going to find a way to get it done. And that's a credit to the man leading this program in Kyle Whittingham. He's made a career out of getting the most out of his talent and then some. But for the Utes, I think it comes down to keeping Cam Rising healthy. That's to me what, really hindered Utah's chances of making it 3 consecutive Pac-12 championships. Got a lot of talent, especially on the defensive side of the football for the Utes with Kareem Reed at linebacker and defensive end Connor O'Toole. Then for me, number 12, I'm going to go Ole Miss. And you think about the Lane train and what it's meant to the folks in Oxford since Lane Kiffin has gotten there. 29 wins for the Rebels over the last 3 years. But will the Rebels be able to live up to the hype this year? You got a veteran quarterback in Jackson Dart. I talked about Quinshon Judkins going to Ohio State, but Ulysses Bentley, the fourth, is no slouch, okay? Excuse me. You bring in the former South Carolina wide receiver, Juice Wells, along with Trey Harris. You got 3 seniors on this offensive line for the Rebels. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you've got a pair of safeties that can get it done in Trey Washington and John Saunders Jr. For Ole Miss, it just comes down to them taking care of their business in the SEC, which is going to be easier said than done. They're at LSU on October 12th. They host Oklahoma on the 26th of October. And for me, this is the big one. They get Georgia in Oxford on November 9th. That's going to really be their chance to dance with the prom queen. So let's see what Ole Miss can do this year. Number 13, staying in the SEC, I'm going to go with LSU. And it's been a smooth transition for the Bayou Bengals from Ed Orgeron to Brian Kelly. Now you've got to get it done at quarterback without Jaden Daniels, and Brian Kelly more than likely is going to rely on junior Garrett Nussmeier. Keep an eye out for senior strong safety Major Burns, who's basically like having an additional linebacker on the field for this Tigers defense. It's not just about him. You get Harold Perkins Jr. back at linebacker, as well as Greg Penn III. Very interesting schedule for LSU. Like I said, they begin the year against USC in Vegas. They then host UCLA out of the Big Ten on the 21st of September. I talked about that Ole Miss contest. They get Alabama at home this year on November 9th. They're at Florida on the 16th of November. And then, of course, they finish off the regular season at home against the Sooners. Number 14, I'm going to go with the Missouri Tigers out of the SEC. They were a surprise team last year. We saw Missouri win 11 games under head coach Eli Drinkwitz. And now, what are they going to be able to do for an encore? Senior quarterback Brady Cook is solid, but I like his top target in his passing game, and that's junior wide receiver Luther Burden III. To me, Burden might be the best wide receiver in the SEC. And honestly, for my money, I really do think, and we saw a lot of wide receivers taken in round number 1 this past spring in the draft. I think if Burden was eligible for the draft, he would have been right there with him. But it's going to be very interesting for me to see if Missouri can live up to the hype, rather, for this year. Number 15, it's Clemson. And I look at Clemson like this. This could be a program in transition, just due to the fact that offensively, at least, they're not getting the top talent like they did once upon a time. They're really relying on their defense. Their defense is still very strong under head coach Dabo Sweeney, but it's going to be interesting to see if they can get enough points to counter and complement that defense. You've got junior quarterback Cade Klubnik, and of course, senior running back Phil Maffa and sophomore wide receiver Tyler Brown. Okay, the Tigers, to me, I like I said, I still think they're going to have a stout defense. They were tops in the ACC a year ago. Still got a lot of talent on that side of the football, which includes senior outside linebacker Barrett Carter and sophomore defensive end TJ Parker. I talked about Clemson traveling to Atlanta to begin the year against Georgia. That's going to be a tough one. They get NC State at home on the 21st of September. They're at Florida State on the 5th of October. They host Louisville on the 2nd of November. And then, of course, they finish up with South Carolina on the 30th of November. Number 16, I'm staying in the ACC and I'm going to go with the Canes, the Miami Hurricanes. And of course, their time in the ACC has not been pretty, if you will, because they came in with that mystique, with that hype, and we really have yet to see the Hurricanes be a new force in their new league. Okay, they've only finished the college football season ranked 6 times since coming to the ACC. When before that, it was almost a given for Miami. All right, they've had 9 different coaches over that stretch, and this is a program that really needs some consistency. You've got a former Hurricane player, leading things for Miami, and Mario Cristobal. He's set to begin his 3rd season as Miami's head coach, and maybe this is the year that the Canes break out. Okay, they got former Washington State quarterback Cam Ward in this offense, and then you've got some solid wide receivers in Xavier Restrepo and Jacoby George. Defensively, keep an eye out for a guy by the name of Ruben Bain Jr. at defensive end. But for me, for Miami, I want to see if they can set the tone to begin their year. They're at Florida on the 31st of this month. They travel to Cal to begin the month of October. Of course, Cal is a new member of the ACC. They're at Louisville on the 19th of that month, which is followed by hosting Florida State on the 26th of October. So I think right there, that could be the stretch that really defines if the Hurricanes are back and how good this team is going to be this season. Number 17, I'm going to go with Kansas. And if anybody watched Kansas last year, they were a very fun team to watch under head coach Lance Leopold, especially on offense. And I think they have that ability to do so once again. Very powerful ground attack. They were a top 10 rushing team last year in the nation. Keep an eye out for running backs Devin Neal and junior Daniel Highshard Jr. Quarterback Jalen Daniels is a dual threat in this system. And then you got some strong wide receivers in Quentin Skinner and Lawrence Arnold. I like this Kansas defense. They've got 8 seniors on that side of the ball, including cornerback Mello Dotson. Now, speaking of fun teams to watch out of the Big 12, number 18, I'm going to go Oklahoma State. And of course, 2 of the last 3 years, we've seen these Cowboys get to the Big 12 championship, only to be turned away from winning the league. They're expected to once again be a top team or one of the top teams in the Big 12. They got a lot of talent. Senior quarterback Alan Bowman, to me, just needs to cut down on the turnovers. We saw him throw 14 interceptions last year. Ollie Gordon, the second at running back, one of the best ball carriers in the nation, and he is running behind one of the most experienced lines in the nation. Oklahoma State has 5 seniors up front. Okay, keep an eye out for wide receivers Rashad Owens and Brendan Presley, because I think this Cowboys offense under Mike Gundy is going to do a lot off of the play action. And then for me, linebacker Nick Martin. Okay, I think he has the potential to be the Big 12's Defensive Player of the Year. And then also keep an eye out for safety Kendall Daniels as well as safety Trey Rucker. Number 19, I'm going to go with the Cardinals out of Louisville. We saw the Cardinals under head coach Jeff Brom get to the ACC championship game last year. Let's see what they can do for an encore, okay? You get the well-traveled Tyler Shaw at quarterback. Of course, he's been at Oregon and Texas Tech recently, or previously rather. You get former Alabama wide receiver Ja'Cory Brooks, but then I like this Louisville defense with middle linebacker TJ Quinn as well as free safety Devin Neal and cornerback Quincy Riley. Louisville's going to have their test. They travel to Notre Dame to take on the Irish on September 28th. They host Miami on the 19th of October, and then they're at Clemson on the 2nd of November. And of course, they finish up in Lexington against Kentucky. Number 20, a little bit low for Oklahoma, but this is where I think the Sooners are right now. I think them losing Dylan Gabriel in the transfer portal, for me, knocked them down. But nonetheless, I still think that they can be a quality team this year under head coach Brent Venables as they transition to the Southeastern Conference. And like I said, no Dylan Gabriel at quarterback as he is at Oregon, but in steps sophomore Jackson Arnold. You think about Oklahoma and you think about their running game. So what is running back Gavin Sawchuk going to be able to do this year? Also, keep an eye out for wide receiver Nick Anderson. And then defensively, Danny Stutzman at middle linebacker. I think he's one of those where great college linebacker. He fits that Oklahoma mold. And to me, he's a linebacker's linebacker. Okay, if it makes sense to anybody out there. Also, it's not just about Stutzman on that side of the football. Keep an eye out for sophomore Kip Lewis at linebacker, as well as senior strong safety Billy Bauman Jr. For Oklahoma, interesting schedule. Their first time around in the SEC, their first SEC conference game, they host Tennessee on the 21st of September, which is followed by a trip to the Plains to take on Auburn the following week. Of course, they get Texas in Dallas on the 12th of October. Then they're at Ole Miss, okay, on the 26th of October. They're at Missouri on the 9th of November, former Big Eight rival. They're back in the same conference now. They host Alabama on the 23rd, and then they're at LSU to finish the season. So how about that for back-to-back weeks? LSU and Alabama. That's the name of the game right now in these mega conferences. Number 21, I'm going to go North Carolina State. And the Wolfpack and head coach Dave Dorm, they've been a thorn in the side of a lot of people in recent years in the ACC. I like them getting Coastal Carolina quarterback Grayson McCall, and then you've got a strong sophomore wide receiver in Kevin Concepcion. So I think Louisville could do some damage. Pardon me, North Carolina State, excuse me, could do some damage this year. Number 22, I'm going to go back to the Big Ten, and I'm going to go with Kirk Ferentz's Iowa Hawkeyes. We've seen them get to the Big Ten championship game in 2 out of the last 3 years. Of course, the Hawkeyes have really just benefited from the weaker Big Ten West. No more divisional formats this year, okay? But you think about it, a lot of changes have come and are needed on the offensive side of the football for Iowa. They've had one of the better defenses in the nation and one of the worst offensive. But like I said, they were able to mask that by playing in the Big Ten West. You've got a new offensive coordinator in Tim Lester. You're hopeful to keep quarterback Cade McNamara healthy this year. That's going to be big. The Hawkeyes can and will run the football. I do believe so with LaShawn Williams. But of course, like I said before, the strength of this team under head coach Kurt Ferentz continues to be defense. They were 7th in the nation a year ago. They're known for their linebacking play under Kurt Ferentz. And keep an eye out for Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson this year from that unit. Number 23, I'm going back to the ACC and I'm going with North Carolina. And you think about what Mac Brown has done since he's returned to Chapel Hill. And it's one of those where the Tar Heels are a very formidable team. We know that North Carolina can get it done on offense. They're a team that has to fix their defense. The Tar Heels were 97th in the nation last year. It resulted in Mac Brown getting rid of Gene Chizik as his defensive coordinator and bringing in former Georgia Tech head coach Jeff Collins to run the show over there. You've got some talent defensively for North Carolina with the likes of linebacker Power Eccles, defensive end Kamon Rucker, and cornerback Elijah Huzzy. And we know that they're going to score points. We just saw Drake May, their quarterback, get taken 3rd overall by the Patriots. But then they get former Texas A&M quarterback Max Johnson, who previously before that was at LSU. So he's another well-traveled veteran signal caller. Keep an eye out for running back Amari and Hampton, as well as wide receiver J.J. Jones. as North Carolina looks to make some noise in the ACC. For 24th, I'm going to go with the Cyclones of Iowa State. And for Matt Campbell and crew, this is always a team that if you're going to beat them, you better pack a lunch, okay? Rocco Becht last year threw 23 touchdowns, excuse me, as a freshman. Got a strong offense with wide receivers Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, as well as running back Abu Sama the third. Defensively, the Cyclones, I do believe, can and will be a force to be reckoned with in the Big 12 with the likes of safety Bo Freiler, as well as outside linebacker Caleb Bacon and free safety Jeremiah Cooper. And then finally, for me at number 25, I started with the SEC. I'm going to finish with the SEC, and I'm going to go with Tennessee. And Josh Heupel has gotten things turned around in Knoxville very quickly. 20-6 are the Volunteers in the last 2 years. No more Joe Milton at quarterback for Tennessee. It's going to be sophomore Nico Iamaleva. Okay. You've got running back Dylan Simpson. You still got wide receivers Brew McCoy and Squirrel White. And I think offensively, Tennessee is going to be fun to watch. Defensive end James Pierce Jr., I think, could be in the mix to be the SEC's Defensive Player of the Year. That's how talented that he is. And I really want to see how the Vols navigate their schedule, which includes a road trip to Norman to take on Oklahoma on the 21st of September. They get Florida at home this year on the 12th of October. Of course, the third Saturday in October, they've got Alabama at home. And then, even though the SEC has ditched the divisional format, Tennessee still got to go take on Georgia in Athens on the 16th of November. So there you have it, folks. That's my top 25 heading into this season. Of course, there's always going to be some teams each and every year that don't live up to the hype. There's always going to be some teams that overachieve that we really didn't expect that much from. But at the end of the game, that's what makes college football because of the excitement on a Saturday to Saturday basis. I think we are in store for a tremendous college football season. I, like a lot of people, are looking forward to it. It's going to be interesting to see how the race for 12 participants in the college football playoff works out. And of course, there's always going to be a 13th team complaining. When we get to 14, there's going to be a 15th team complaining. It's the nature of the beast. But nonetheless, college football is here. Sit back and enjoy it and watch the show. So, folks, that's going to do it. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.